Hi friends, so the last thing that we have to talk about when it comes to altered states of consciousness is the impact of drugs on consciousness. You talk about this in health class, so we're not going to belabor the point, but we definitely need to go over it. So what we're talking about here are what are known as psychoactive drugs. Psychoactive drugs are chemicals that impact the nervous system and result in altered states of consciousness. A drug is anything that goes into the body, whether it be inhaled, snorted, consumed like by drinking, eating, etc. So there's three broad categories of drugs. They are hallucinogens, depressants, and stimulants. So the first one that we're going to talk about are hallucinogens. Hallucinogens are quite simply drugs that produce hallucinations, which doesn't really tell you much because we're using the word to define the word. So what are hallucinations? They are perceptions that have no direct external cause. It's seeing things that aren't really there, hearing things that aren't really there, feeling things that aren't really there. These are also sometimes referred to as psychedelics. The most potent and well-studied of hallucinogens is LSD. So LSD is actually a man-made drug. When someone consumes LSD, the experience from person to person is actually pretty similar. It starts with geometric forms and a tunnel-like perspective, and then those forms often start to combine and duplicate, usually in color. A lot of people who are on LSD talk about how colors have a sound or sounds have colors, things like that. The trip, as it's called, lasts anywhere between 6 to 14 hours, and although it usually begins with intense and rapidly changing patterns and perceptions, oftentimes it ends up with a panic reaction. It doesn't stay benign, if you will. Panic reactions are the most common unpleasant side effect. The use of LSD peaked in the 1960s and has since worn off. That's not to say that people don't still utilize LSD. They do. The thing is, once you utilize LSD, it does remain in your system for the remainder of your life, and you can have flashbacks at any period of time. So you could consume LSD when you were 20 years old and in college, and when you're 50 years old sitting in a business meeting, you could have a flashback, which would not do well for you in the business setting. The second hallucinogen we're going to talk about is marijuana. So marijuana is classified as a hallucinogen. The active ingredient in marijuana is THC. Why is it classified as a hallucinogen? Because people talk about colors being more vivid, tastes being stronger, etc. The effects of marijuana vary from person to person. You don't always have positive results with marijuana. It heightens whatever emotions someone is in prior to the utilization of marijuana. So if someone's in a bad mood, it can make that bad mood worse. Marijuana is not physiologically addictive. Physiologically addictive is whenever your body becomes dependent upon something physically. It is, however, psychologically addictive, where someone might feel panicked if they don't have access to it, or as though they cannot actually function without it. The legal and moral acceptance, if you will, of marijuana has changed rather significantly over the decades. So we saw the use of marijuana increase in the 60s and 70s, then it began to decline. However, in today's day and age, we are seeing a resurgence in the use of marijuana. We have started to see the medicinal benefits of marijuana. Most states now, Pennsylvania included, do have laws that allow for medicinal marijuana, which can help with individuals who are undergoing chemotherapy, individuals who have seizure disorders, individuals with autism. There's a wide variety of uses for medicinal marijuana. We've also seen several states and the District of Columbia legalize the recreational use of marijuana. Would it surprise me in the next 10 years or so if all states have the legal use of marijuana recreationally? No, it would not. Just because something may become legal does not necessarily mean that it is good for you, though. Please keep in mind, alcohol is also legal, yet we also know that there are several not so great impacts from alcohol. So the next group that we're going to talk about are your depressants or opiates. These are also sometimes referred to as narcotics. Narcotic coming from the Greek word narke, which means numbness or stupor. The most common narcotics are opium, morphine, heroin. So Morphine and heroin are derivatives of opium. Morphine was originally introduced during the Civil War to help mitigate the pain of individuals who had been injured during the Civil War. What we found, though, is it took away their pain, but they became addicted to morphine. So that addiction to morphine became known as the soldier's disease. Heroin was then introduced because it was thought it was going to be the cure to the addiction to morphine. It would be the hero, if you will, of soldier's disease. However, now what we find is that people are unfortunately addicted to heroin. So the explicit use for narcotics, the use that we approve of, if you will, is a reduction in pain. We do still have people who have chronic pain because of disease ravaging their body or having just undergone significant medical procedures where opiates are appropriate. However, they are also something that people can easily become addicted to because in addition to the reduction of pain, they also produce a sense of euphoria. Opiates lead to physical addiction, meaning that the body, that becomes its normal state, and without it, the body panics, if you will. The problem is that you begin to also build up tolerance, so you need more and more of that in order to achieve the same effect, which leads to loss of control of breathing and eventually death. Another depressant is, of course, alcohol. Alcohol is the most widely used and abused mind-altering substance in the United States. We have a crazy relationship with alcohol. We know that it does not so great things for you. It damages your liver, it kills off brain cells, we know that it's addictive, we know that it impairs judgment. Yet we also encourage people through ads, movies, television, social expectations, and traditions to engage in the consumption of alcohol. So alcohol is associated with the loosening of inhibitions, and so that's why some people don't realize that it is still, though, a depressant. It may appear to be a stimulant because of that loosening of inhibitions, however, but it's actually a depressant because it inhibits the brain's normal functions. We become less focused on the consequences of our behavior. The effects of alcohol vary depending on the amount consumed, the frequency of drinking, and the drinker's body weight. Common signs of having too much alcohol are slurred words, blurred vision, impaired judgment, impaired memory, and being clumsy. It also leads to, like I said, brain and liver damage as well as changes in personality. We also know that, interestingly enough, if you will, our culture is so tied into alcohol consumption, and we utilize it in a social setting so much that they've done several experiments where they give one group actual beverages containing alcohol and another group beverages where they're told it contains alcohol but it does not actually contain any alcohol. And what they found is that as the night progresses, both groups act equally as drunk. So it's almost kind of like proof, if you will, that we use alcohol as an excuse to behave in certain ways. The final category are stimulants. Stimulants are the opposite of depressants. They increase the activity of the nervous system. Even though they are the opposite of depressants, you cannot sober yourself up after using a depressant with a stimulant. It doesn't work that way. So if you're drinking alcohol and you want to sober up, you can't go have a cup of strong coffee. Essentially what you're doing is you're giving your body two different signals at the same time. So think of it like this. If you were to go out and start your car and stomp on the gas and the brake at the same time, your car doesn't neutralize, it burns up. And that's what you're doing to your body whenever you give it stimulants and depressants at the same time. So stimulants speed up the heart rate, speed up the breathing rate. What are some of the more common stimulants that are utilized? Nicotine is probably the most common stimulant, and we're negating caffeine right now. That's really debated. If we were to include caffeine, caffeine is by far the most commonly used stimulant in the United States. So with nicotine, this causes adrenaline to be released. It's one of the most common stimulants. It is addictive. It is thought that for every cigarette one smokes, you take 7 minutes off of your life. We are seeing a significant decrease in the Americans who smoke. In the 1960s, 40% of American adults smoked. Now that number is down to about 25%. Why? It's become expensive, and it's also become difficult to do socially. So, Most restaurants do not allow smoking. You're not allowed to smoke within a certain number of feet of all businesses. And some companies have even gone so far as to say, like, we will not offer you insurance benefits if you are a smoker, or we won't hire you if you are a smoker. Another category of stimulants are amphetamines. Amphetamines help people stay awake. They are sometimes referred to as speed. They were first used by soldiers in World War II in order to remain awake and alert during the night. Someone who utilizes stimulants may stay awake for hours or even days. However, eventually you're going to crash. That crash is going to involve, at the very least, a deep sleep. It may also include depression and even suicidal thoughts. High doses of stimulants can lead to restlessness, insomnia, irritability, and delusions. The third category of stimulants, cocaine. So we separate cocaine out as being its own separate stimulant because it is so incredibly physically addictive, and it also becomes very easy to overdose. Cocaine causes feelings of pleasure, it deadens pain, and it boosts self-confidence. It also, however, raises your blood pressure and decreases the amount of oxygen that can get to the brain, which leads eventually to death. This is it for Chapter 7. We'll be giving you your Chapter 7 test and or culminating project here coming up. Stay safe, my friends.